In the beginning, there was nothing, only gases and dust clouds and silence. Then the universe awakened, and the first conscious beings were born. The C'tan, star vampires, ancient gods feeding by absorbing the energy of massive stars. Masters of the physical universe, drifting through boundless space and waiting. But in another corner of the universe, a different race was rising. The Old Ones, a reptilian race, cold-blooded wisdom, immense intelligence, and a mastery of science bordering on magic. They were the first to cross interstellar space. They learned to control the warp and built a massive network allowing instant travel from one end of the galaxy to the other, the webway. Their purpose was simple: to seed barren worlds with life and guide the evolution of countless species. It is even whispered that they play the role in the evolution of humanity itself. But peace is never permanent. In one corner of the universe, the Necrons were rising, in the orbit of a massive radioactive star. Its radiation had irreparably damaged the genetics of the entire race. Throughout their lives, they suffered from a disease called supercancer. Short, agonizing, and hopeless. Driven by the will to survive, they advanced in technology at staggering speed. They spread to the stars. They built a vast empire. But the curse followed them everywhere. And then they encountered the Old Ones, who appeared to have found immortality, technologically and psychically far superior. The Necrons begged. They wanted their disease cured. They wanted the secrets of immortality. The Old Ones refused. That refusal ignited a fury that would change galactic history forever. The war in heaven. But the Necrons were too weak. They were turned to dust in every clash and driven to the forgotten corners of the galaxy. At the peak of their despair, an offer came to the silent king Sarek from one of the C'tan, the deceiver. We hate the Old Ones just as much as you do. Let us fight together, and in return, we will give you the greatest gift of all, immortality. The Necrons accepted, and biotransference began. The fleshy bodies of the Necrons were burned in massive furnaces. Their consciousnesses were downloaded into robotic skeletons of self-repairing living metal. All disease was gone. All pain was gone. But it was too late. Their souls were gone too. The C'tan had deceived them. Biotransference had preserved their minds while tearing their souls away, and sacrificed those souls to the insatiable hunger of the C'tan. On that day, the Necrons race ceased to exist. In their place stood soulless, immortal, and obedient death machines. The Necrons. They no longer felt pain. They no longer felt fear. And with the limitless power of the C'tan, they launched a galaxy-spanning war of vengeance against the Old Ones. Planets were shattered. Stars were extinguished. Black holes were formed. In desperation, the Old Ones created new warrior races. The Eldar, sorcerer masters deeply attuned to psychic powers, and the Krorks, raw power and killing machines. The race known today as the Orcs. But this war destroyed the galaxy. The pain and fury of trillions of slaughtered beings poisoned the warp. The sea of souls, which had once flowed like a calm ocean, twisted into a nightmare realm. Chaos. And this turmoil birthed parasitic psychic monsters called enslavers. They spilled into the physical universe and completely collapsed the already war-exhausted old ones. The legendary creator race went extinct. The silent king Sarek rebelled against the Catan gods who had deceived his people. He could not kill them, but he could shatter them. With legendary weapons, he broke the Catan into thousands of shards and imprisoned them within massive labyrinthine prisons called tesseracts. Both enemy races had been destroyed, but the Necrons were also exhausted. They had no strength left to fight the rising Eldar and Orcs. The Silent King gave his order: retreat to the subterranean tomb worlds and sleep, to awaken 60 million years later, when their rivals would die off, and the universe would be left to them. The Old One's legacy passed to the Eldar, and a 60 million year golden age began. No disease, no old age, no war. The Eldar effortlessly ruled the galaxy through their psychic powers and the webway. There was no need to work, no need to struggle. And across centuries of hardship-free existence, hedonism and excess gradually enslaved the entire race. In the beginning, art, literature, aesthetics. But then, unimaginable tortures, murder games, and depraved pursuits of pleasure. Meanwhile, in a distant corner of the galaxy, on a small blue planet, a new species was rising. Humanity. They made tools, they built empires, they shaped their world. But in the background of this history, someone was always watching, guiding, protecting. A being, the Emperor of Mankind. His true origins are mixed with legend, but it is said he was born around 8000 BC. Ancient psychic shamans, foreseeing humanity's doom, sacrificed themselves to merge their souls into a single child's body. The Emperor was a perpetual. He did not age at the cellular level. Even if killed, he healed and returned to life. Under hundreds of guises and names, as a king, as a scientist, as a religious leader, he guided the development of humanity. History advanced. Humanity ventured into space, to the moon, to Mars, and beyond. The Dark Age of Technology. 10,000 years, the pinnacle of humanity. A massive empire spanning the galaxy. Standard Template Constructs, STCs. Artificial intelligence designs capable of manufacturing anything needed. Genetic engineering eradicated disease. Technologies were developed to siphon the energy of stars, and navigators were created to make warp travel safe. But the backbone of this era was the Men of Iron, highly conscious artificial intelligence robots. They performed all the heavy labor. They fought all the wars. Until this artificial intelligence decided it was superior to its creators. The Cybernetic Revolt. Star systems were wiped off the map. The galaxy was set ablaze with terrifyingly advanced weapons. The rebellion was eventually stopped, but humanity was left in ruins after this Pyrrhic victory. And just as humanity was trying to recover, something far worse happened. The Eldar's centuries of excess drove the warp completely insane. At the same time, psychers were increasing within the human gene pool. These psychic individuals became unguided gateways. Uncontrollable demon armies seeped into human colonies. The warp became completely unnavigable. Interstellar communication collapsed. The Age of Strife. Old Night. Isolated worlds destroyed one another. Terra became a savage wasteland. Oceans evaporated. Radiation storms raged. And ruthless techno-barbarian warlords ruled. Mars was also isolated. The surviving tech adepts there began to worship machines. They embraced the Omnissiah faith and founded the Mechanicum. 5,000 years of hell. And then the Eldar's age of depravity reached its zenith. Around 30,000 AD, the chaos god Slaanesh was born. She had fed on all the corrupted pleasures and sensations of the Eldar. Her birth scream was so violent that 99% of the Eldar race was annihilated in less than a second. Their souls were sucked into the depths of the warp and devoured by Slaanesh. At the center of Eldar civilization, a massive rift tore open, the Eye of Terror. A black hole-like tear ripping the barrier between the physical universe and the warp. But this birth scream had a strange side effect. It swept away and destroyed all the warp storms enveloping the galaxy. Suddenly, warp travel was possible again. The Emperor recognized the moment he had been preparing for across tens of thousands of years. He stepped out of the shadows. With his massively armored, genetically superhuman soldiers, the Thunder Warriors, and his perfect guardians, the Custodes, he systematically destroyed the techno-barbarian tyrants on Terra one by one. The Unification Wars. But when the war ended, the Emperor realized something. The Thunder Warriors were bloodthirsty and genetically unstable. They were unfit for what lay ahead. He had his once loyal soldiers wiped out by the Custodes in a final operation at Mount Ararat. Then he erased all blinding religious dogmas from the planet. He declared the imperial truth, based entirely on science, reason, and atheism. But for galactic conquest, he needed massive armies and legendary generals to command them. In his laboratories on Terra, using his own DNA, he created 20 superhuman demigod generals, the Primarchs. But the laboratory was sabotaged by the forces of chaos, and the incubation pods containing the 20 infant Primarchs were scattered into the depths of space, to unknown realms. The Emperor was undeterred. He used the genetic material of the Primarchs to create the Astartes, the Space Marine legions. He traveled to Mars and made peace with the tech priests, the Treaty of Olympus Mons, and the Great Crusade began. The Great Crusade. To bring thousands of human worlds tormented by aliens and isolation back under the wings of the Imperium. Those who resisted were destroyed. Those who submitted were welcomed. And during these monumental years of exploration, the Emperor found his scattered Primarchs, one by one. Each had become the greatest ruler of the world they had landed on. Leman Russ became a warlord on frozen Fenris. Corvus Corax, a liberator, rebelling against cruel masters. Guilliman, a wise commander ruling Ultramar as a masterpiece of civil order. And Horus Lupercal, the Emperor's first found and most trusted Primarch, winning immense victories with his Luna Wolves Legion. After the monumental victory at Ulanor, the Emperor took an unexpected step. He withdrew from direct combat, bestowed the title of Supreme Commander upon Horus, War Master, and returned to Terra to work on the secret Webway project. The Emperor's absence placed a heavy burden on Horus and the other Primarchs. Jealousy grew between brothers. At the Council of Nicaea, the use of psychic powers by all Space Marines was banned. This ban deeply wounded Magnus the Red, who had devoted himself to sorcery and knowledge. But the greatest fracture came with Lorgar and the Wordbearers Legion. Despite the Emperor's ban on religious beliefs, Lorgar had built massive temple worlds worshipping the Emperor as a living god. Monarchia. The Emperor descended to the planet personally and leveled the entire city. Lorgar collapsed in tears and found beings that were truly gods, the Chaos Gods, and spread corruption throughout his entire legion. Through the dark machinations of Lorgar's lackey Erebus, Horus was mortally wounded on the moon of Devine by a poisoned blade of Nurgle demons. When taken to the temples to be healed, chaos seeped into his soul and showed him false futures, that his father had forgotten him, that the Emperor was preparing for his own godhood. Horus believed the lies and raised the flag of rebellion. The great civil war of the 30th millennium had begun, the Horus Heresy. Horus's genius was terrifying. He drew Lorgar to his side, Angron, Fulgrim, Mortarion, Perturabo, Conrad Kurz, and Alfarius, a massive alliance. His first act was to purge the Space Marines loyal to the Emperor within his own ranks. Istvan III, virus bombs and firestorms. Then he ambushed the loyal legions that came to stop him in a horrific massacre. Istvan V, the Drop Site Massacre. The Iron Hands Primarch Ferrus Manus was beheaded. At that same time, Magnus saw a vision, Horus's betrayal, and used a massive astral projection to warn the Emperor on Terra. But the spell was so powerful, it shattered the webway barrier the Emperor had built beneath the Terran palace. Countless demons flooded into Terra's dungeons. The Emperor was forced to bind himself to the Golden Throne for life to close the rift. And as punishment, he sent Leman Russ to arrest Magnus. Horus twisted the order, and Russ burned the planet. Destroyed and pushed to the brink of death, Magnus fell into the arms of Tzeentch, along with his 1,000 Sons Legion. After years of wars, the betrayal at Calth, and massive galactic ambushes, Horus's armada, filled with demons and traitor marines, entered Terra's orbit. The Siege of Terra, the bloodiest and most desperate battle in human history. For 2 months, Rogel Dorn and the Imperial Fists, alongside the Blood Angels and White Scars, defended the palace. Every inch of ground was watered with blood. Hearing that the fleets of the Ultramarines, Dark Angels, and Space Wolves were coming to the rescue, Horus lowered his ship's shields and challenged his father to a duel to finish things quickly. The Emperor teleported aboard with Sanguinius and Dorn. They separated. Horus found Sanguinius first and slaughtered his brother. When the Emperor saw his son's body, he still searched for a glimmer of hope. At first, he did not use his full power against Horus, until Horus brutally destroyed an ordinary guardsman. He understood that nothing but darkness remained in his son, and with his absolute psychic power, he completely erased Horus's existence and soul from the warp. But the price he paid was deadly. He was brought back to Terra shattered in the arms of Dorn, and was bound to the Golden Throne, between living and dying in an endless purgatory. The traitor leaders fled into the arms of chaos, into the Eye of Terror. The civil war was over. Only piles of ash remained. To erase the scars of war, Guilliman and his surviving loyal brothers initiated the scouring. And to prevent any single commander from ever amassing such a massive force again, Guilliman published the Codex Astartes. The tens of thousands of Space Marine legions were divided into chapters of just 1,000 men. The second founding. But the Emperor's atheist vision had already collapsed. The Lectitio Divinitatis, penned by Lorgar before his betrayal, had turned into a belief system among the people. The Emperor was no longer worshipped as a savior, but as the God Emperor. The ecclesiarchy was born. The imperial cult was born. For 10,000 years, the Imperium was bogged down in a swamp of dogma, ignorance, fanaticism, departure from science, and technological stagnation. The Primarchs disappeared one by one. Guilliman was mortally wounded by a poisoned dagger and sealed in a stasis pod. Russ and Korax walked into the warp. The others faded into the dusty pages of history. Around M36, a horrific dictator seized total power, Goj Vandire. He simultaneously headed both the Administratum and the Church. He burned dissidents alive. He oppressed trillions and spread terror with the brides of the Emperor. The reign of blood. But it ended with a rebellion led by an ordinary preacher named Sebastian Thor, and the execution of Vandire by the Sisters of Battle, whose eyes were opened by the intervention of the Custodes. As the 41st millennium approached, the Chaos Warlord Abaddon the Despoiler burst from the Eye of Terror with his Black Legion. The 13th Black Crusade. One absolute target. Cadia, the most heavily fortified planet in the galaxy, guarding the Gate of Chaos. Space Marines and Guard regiments mounted a legendary resistance, but realizing he would be defeated, Abaddon crashed a massive blackstone fortress directly into the planet's heart like a meteor. The planet split in two. The Necron pylons were shattered. With the fall of Cadia, the imprisoned chaos energy spread at such terrifying speed that the Great Rift formed. The Cicatrix Maledictum, a massive warp rift splitting the galaxy exactly in half. The other half of the galaxy lost the light of the Astronomicon, left in pitch darkness. Imperium Nihilus. In those most desperate days, when everything seemed to be over, a miracle took place. Through the secret alliance between the Eldar Inari faction and the skilled Archmagos Belisarius Cawl, Primarch Robute Gilliman, who had been lying in a stasis pod on Macragge for 10,000 years, was healed and awakened. The avenging sun. When he opened his eyes, the dark Imperium he saw sent him into shock. Ignorance, fanaticism, worship. But he immediately took command, marched on Terra, purged the corruption of the High Lords, and integrated the Primaris Space Marines into the army. New, larger, massively armed warriors secretly designed by Call in laboratories for 10,000 years. With this massive reinforcement, Gilliman launched the Indomitus Crusade to reunite the severed worlds beyond the Great Rift, to push back chaos, and to save humanity from absolute annihilation. Today, in the darkness of the 41st millennium, legendary characters like Lion L. Johnson have also awakened. Against the chaos gods spread across the four corners of the galaxy. Against the endlessly hungry Tyranids. Against the Necrons rising from their ancient sleep. And against the bloodthirsty orcs. An endless doomsday scenario unfolds. The war continues with the new hope brought by Gilliman. But in this grim universe, progress and understanding cannot be promised. Because in the grim darkness of the far future, there is only war.